Welcome back, audience. Hope you're doing good, as always. And today, we're going to talk about archetypes. I just decided to talk about this subject because, and I want to talk about this in terms of the meaning of it, not in terms of another idea of an archetype, because that's not an archetype itself. You see what I'm trying to say? The idea of an archetype is not an archetype. And the reason I want to talk about this is because I've witnessed through calibration of consciousness or alchemy, whatever you want to call it, of the direct experience of what happens on what I call soul level or the energy level when you tune to one particular state or the other. It's just one particular energetic state, and it is when you tune to it, your energy changes. And I've explored some of those that are quite intense, and you can say like very masculine and more feminine and something in between. But there's these archetypes out there. We can call them archetypes, states of consciousness, whatever you want to call them. But like when you experience it directly, because I came up with this sort of like label of archetype, not because I read about the archetypes, it's because I was looking at like what are these things that I'm experiencing. It's clearly like a different identity that I'm feeling, that it has the capacities that already there, okay, intuitive capacities. It does require this machine side to know the skills, because otherwise it cannot really fully express itself, because there's obviously there's lack of skill. But if I have the capacity to express it through the skill, there seems to be a certain type of state, certain type of archetype, an identity that is expressing itself. And one thing I have to say that I arrived to this through the consciousness calibration. So it stems from something that already has the control over that archetype. Does that make sense? Because I already have this organizing principle, and I'm making sure that every archetype that is on is under control. Because if you don't calibrate the consciousness, you can tap into this archetype like a psychopathic state, for example, right? And be out of control. So something to say about this. For example, we live in this world, and sometimes there are malevolent intents coming from people, or some people who are primarily stay in those states all the time, and they function very coldly. And usually these are the people who like governing positions, because they can hide in the plain sight. One second. Right? That type of. And so these individuals sometimes could be like in a position to cause like direct malevolence if they don't lose control, and then they take like the violent approach. Now in that case, if push comes to shove, and it threatens somebody's life or whatnot, if you don't have the capacity to match that type of state and defend yourself lethally if it's necessary, then you're kind of screwed, right? So, but to lose complete control over it, that's also not good. So for example, a good actor or a good athlete, is capable of separating those two and calling upon that archetype when it is needed, right? But there's still some humanity there, sort of online, and not a complete loss of control. But that coldness, for example, which are necessary to fight in, in martial arts and whatever, because if you are too warm-hearted, like you wouldn't want to hurt your opponent, but in that case you kind of have to, right? If you are in that type of sport, that type of martial arts. So the person who's capable of bringing that force is, and then still having control over it, is sort of like tapping into that energy and being a good athlete, you see. And that's what it takes sometimes to counteract these ultimately malevolent, entities and whatnot. And I like, for example, in the movie Equilibrium, how he was essentially in the reality where everybody in control are psychopaths and controlling everybody, you see, and he was a normal human with emotions and everything, but when the push comes to shove, he was able to completely to turn that off in order to fight the evil. You see? But there's still a humanity behind it. So that's because sometimes you do need it, and I do recognize it fully. Sometimes you gotta turn on that state of consciousness, which is just complete beast mode, not imaginary beast mode. It is sort of like a bear. You are barely in control, but you are in control. But if it's necessary, it can be unleashed at any moment and do what has to be done. I learned this. I'm living in the jungle by myself, essentially. With, I mean, I'm not completely sort of, because I balance it out, like my solitude and socializing. I balance it out because I understand the importance of it. But living in the jungle by yourself among all these animals and apes, excuse me, apes, like monkeys and all sorts of animals around here, you get to tune in to what's happening, So on that primal level, so and you can kind of know how each animal even feels like if you tap into that energy vibration of that animal, and then you kind of understand, it's like, oh, that's why, for example, a lion, the king of the jungle, is not the biggest, not the strongest, but why? It's just because of the courage. This is why lion usually symbolizes courage. And what is courage? Courage is a specific state of consciousness that is a how could I describe it? It is a capacity to move into fear and organize it into order. But more precisely in this case, it is a type of primal courage. So it is a type of, I'm gonna face the fear, and because of that calm within that fear, I'll have a better agility and speed and awareness of what's going on, and therefore I have a sort of superiority in that type of fight, even though you have a strength. But because you do not have that capacity to control the fear, your reaction time will be affected, and your strength is going to be not as useful in this particular case, for example, right? And so that's the type of mastery of those types of emotions. And I think Mike Tyson is one of those people who really mastered that primal courage really well. I mean, he was struggling with it, like admittedly, but in the end it was all right, like in the end it was all right. So at least he at least attempted to tap into that type of level of energy, which is insane. But anyway, and by the way, Castamaro is the one who taught him how to do that. He was essentially harmonizing the energies, if you will, and he wasn't just learning the skills, he was also learning how to use the opponent's fear to your advantage. And of course, with all the speed, with all the strength, with all the skills, with all the techniques and timing, you can't stop that, man. It's force of nature. So that's how great this is made. That component is very important. Ability to call upon the archetype. And you don't just call upon the archetype, you have to polish it. Right? It is you cannot improve it, because that implies like there's like some sort of like a future point in time where this will be better than it. No, this thing, this inner game, this vertical dimension is not improved, but it is discovered. It is discovered. It is the control of your attention and the play with those energies. And it's always about this. It's going to ask one of the 4 elements to really tune into that. And of course, on a alchemy level, or this primordial level, and the calibration level, there is no kind of memory per se. The memory is very basic. The memory is only about the attention and the focal point, or awareness, or aperture. And in between, there is that space that may be required to be a little bit more this way, a little bit more that way, a little bit more this way, that way, see? And then those 2 dimensions of focal point and aperture opens up to more dimensions, which more like expanding and contracting, right? And so there are these 4 elements already there. And when they're completely aligned, ether is formed. And out of that ether, well, technically what is formed is the true spirit. Like, that's why I don't use that word spirit into consecutive layers of consciousness. Even though people would still use it, like if you see some visual in astral projection, to them that's like a spirit world. I would not call that spirit. To me, spirit is that white light energy before it's been diffracted into the colors, which are the actual ether. And that is the capacity of your soul to take one cymatic vibration or the other, and these are the states of consciousness, or archetypes. And archetypes are these where it's sort of like things are gravitating towards. And so archetypes is, it's almost like a theme, right? When you put on that theme, there's a type of energy, the type of music that is being played, right? And this is the type of action that you're going to do. This is the type of thoughts you're going to have. This is the type of ideas you're going to have. You are taking upon a true identity, right? But you can only get this through this side, because otherwise, if you go through the other side, they're all going to be negative. Okay, so you gotta go through this side. What does it mean? It means that you need to have that energy of spirit, or mystery, or bliss, or many different names. And at that level, like I said, there is no memory. And this is why mind cannot help you, because mind functions on data structuring. And this is not yet data, this is quanta. And it does require your attention and awareness in that game to put it back into that coherence. And once you have that coherence, then you can tap into these archetypical states that are required based on what you need at that particular moment. And that's theurgy. And through doing this theurgy, I realized that, oh, these are the archetypes. These are, you can equate them to the vibrations in those cymatic phenomena. Um, and eventually, you can see that you are taking that type of identity that is fluid. It's not static. And you really take that identity. It's but in order not to get lost in it, because it is a type of um, multiple personality order, right? In order to not get lost in it, you got to, when that energy stops vibrating, it has to fall back into that primordial coherence. That's what it needs to fall back upon, that peaceful, blissful kind of state. If it doesn't, you lose control over it. And this archetype takes its own, and you are not in control of the archetype. You, as a mind can, or a body, cannot control the archetype. The only energy that can control the archetype is that logos. That's why you enter this world of theurgy, this world of white magic, if you will, only through this side. You see? This is why there's a danger if you're taking too many psychedelics and you're venturing these things, but you don't have anybody who can center that energy. That energy may lose control and go haywire and make people mad. So this is why you cannot still have an ego, which is that incoherence, and tap in and getting, let me get you my superpowers, or like, oh, let me do the magic. No, you're gonna get, like, look, this is just the way it is. You're gonna get your ass handed to you if you do this. You can do this limiting thing. I mean, first of all, like, this is supposed to be just the approach to life of how we place our attention and whatever we do. It's not, like I said, like, it's not a specific section of time for meditating and doing these things, like, right, like, with the exception, of course, if you practicing astral projection, that's mine, that this, it requires concentration, it requires all sorts of different things. This is not it. This is just about the quality of consciousness, coherence of consciousness. Just so astral projection is a type of mind work. So that's why you need to sit down, close your eyes, and focus, and do all sorts of tricks in order to begin traversing it. But as soon as, if you keep on traversing that, and the deeper you go into these dimensions, you're gonna come across the limit, which you can only pass through by facing type of energies and alchemizing them. And that's the only way you'll be able to access these higher dimensions. Except, I mean, with exclusion, if you keep on using psychedelics, then you see, like, you can kind of, but look, there's a bit of a problem. I told you, I mean, in a previous video about, is psychedelics false light, right? And it can help you, because it can definitely, like, open things up for you and allow you later to get to these states of consciousness by yourself, which is right. But if you keep on using it, what happens if you stop using it? And I mean, if you stop using it for a significant period of time. Right? difficulties come in. And some people, they never should have done it, But some people seem to be able to do this. But even then, I'm very cautious. Like I don't like when I hear people say that they've been taking hundreds of times, like I've taken DMT hundreds of times. I'm a little bit concerned, because like I said, I've seen people not kind of coming back from it, because maybe there are exceptions. Maybe some people kind of can get away with this, and maybe somebody else is alchemizing, calibrating the energies for them so they can do this. But it doesn't mean that everybody can, because if you keep on doing this as a type of cheating at life, and chickens do come home to roost if you keep on cheating at it. There's some things that's going to happen that it's just not, you're not gonna like it, because that incoherence, because you are dealing with psychedelic, and psychedelic compensates for that lack of incoherence, right? But it's not that it's gone. You understand? I mean, there's some of it that it is gone, but the deeper layers, they're not gone. Like if you have like some addiction, stuff like that, it will definitely take care of it. But like with deeper layers, which is your life, this is what you're meant to be facing, every day as you live. Those the psychedelics will not do that for you, and you should not use psychedelics for that. Does that make sense? Because then it builds up, and like Eckhart Tolle is calling that pain body. That builds up. You see, because you spent way too much time like exploring it in the consciousness using psychedelics and never really going through the right end of it. It backfires, just like it backfired on Terence McKenna. And this is why I'm worried about the people who right now, sort of like following his footsteps without cautionary tale. And it's fun to explore it and understand and everything, but you have to be careful, because you would rather live another day and fight another fight than not be able to do that anymore because you abuse the system too much. You see? And by the way, the evolution of consciousness has a pace. You cannot go beyond it, and you cannot slow it down. It's going, right? And if you don't keep up with it, shit builds up. You gotta keep up with it. But if you rush into it, also creates another problem. So on this vertical dimension, you gotta stay in between those two, and you be exactly where life is, and edging with it. I'm talking about from both perspectives, because I've had this time where, when you take psychedelic, and then you discover these things, you get super excited, and and just like, okay, and then you may go way too much into the future, right? There's no need to be there, because this is not where we're at right now. And if you go way too much, then you're not going to enjoy life. Maybe it's good to visit, to see it, come back and say, okay, what is happening right now? You see, like, and at this particular pace, let's go. And of course, there I was on the other side as well. I was just like, leaning back too much. That also creates a problem. So you have to always stay in between. And so I've had this where I was kind of frustrated and thinking like, why like this world is not fixed and is still functioning on the matrix societal structure, which is not how it's supposed to be. This is not how to live on this planet. Yes, the settings of this game we don't change. We don't try to change them. However, how we play them is completely legit, and how we play them right now is not good. You see, like the governmental structures and societal structures, they are not good. They are not. We're, little by little, we're kind of breaking them and changing them, and there's a common consensus that, like, okay, I think we should change this law a little bit different. I think we should treat people a little bit different here, a little bit different here. Like, there's that evolution happening. But at first I was like, hey, this is messed up. It's like drastic changes you have to do, the drastic changes, stuff like that. And now I realize, no, you cannot push that too far. Even though you can see the trajectory, you can see the technology, you can see the level of coherence in society that could be there, but it's not, you still have to give it time, right? Maybe in 2030, there's going to be, a little bit better. 2040, by 2050, perhaps we can get to that level of coherence that you can see and imagine to be the case with your, futuristic prospect, or the prediction from the coherence that you're on. So by holding that vision and being okay to hold that vision and not forcing that vision to happen, but just allowing this to, grow slowly, the system does not have any kind of backlash to that. You won't experience that you are sort of like making too much ruckus. You see what I'm trying to say? Yes, you can see like 5-10 steps ahead already, but you don't jump into that, so people, like, we still have this type of problems where there's just way too many people in charge that are complete psychopaths. You see, like, and laws are enforced that are quite inhumane and whatnot, and sometimes, like, these boundaries are not clear, and they open the borders and they let all these people come in that are just clearly still on an animal level of evolution. There's all these problems that are happening right now, at that level. And then somebody's talking about, hey, let's get this 0-point gravity, and 0 kind of point energy, all this, like, multidimensional civilization level. I mean, you see what I'm trying to say? You got to kind of temper that a little bit and say, like, okay, what is the most important thing right now? Because you cannot bring that technology in a world that run by monkeys. You can't do that. So you see, like, okay, technologically we can see that, like, it can be super awesome and super cool, but we're not going to go there yet. Because we still have societal problems to resolve, and we got to focus there to bring that up, so then we can move on with the technology. And I think this is why these people tend to die, who are way too futuristic. You can also argue that, well, they die in this reality, but perhaps they, live in another reality, another version, because they probably are. You see what I'm trying to say? If the person is advancing way too fast, I think the system may be like, okay, this is just this person is already graduated. What are they doing in this particular school? And anyway, through the anecdotal evidence, I can say that some people do report, like, when they die here, they actually continue work in another reality. And Neville Goddard also said that when you die here, you don't actually die. You come up, you pop up on a reality just like this, and continue your work in another physical reality, or parallel reality, if you will. Okay, I don't want to go too much into this thing, but what could happen there, and where do the souls go when they, push the envelope too much? But it's not a coincidence when people are, and you can say, well, the deep state is killing them, and and like, yeah, there's some of it is there where there's some powers where just like there's a complete selfish reason, which is a program, that also needs to be resolved. Like you can't have in a CIA or FBI these type of individuals who are complete psychopaths. You can't have that, right? This is the organization that's supposed to be protecting people and finding the best way possible. This is not the organization that's supposed to be fucking shit up, you know? So there's a lot of malevolence that still need to be cleaned up before we can go into that level of technology. And that's what the system does. Is like, no, not yet. Focus on coherence. Focus on societal coherence. You do not have the infrastructure to withhold this much energy, this much technology. And the system will always chop the people who are trying to jump above their navel, because that's just the way it works. So what does that mean? It means that easy does it. Okay? Yes, it's great to have that excitement, that passion, that's great, but you got to consider that the pace of the evolution, and you're probably going to have to, this thing that you've discovered, you're probably going to have to talk about it for 5 or 10 years or maybe even more before the consensus changes, and that is becoming more accepted. Like even Einstein, when he came up with his theories, almost everybody rejected his theories at first because it was so ahead of the time, right? Because he undermined certain laws of physics that's already been settled, you know. But through time, through his speaking and talking about this, and there's with more and more scientists having other scientists to see the same way. So you see that paper that he wrote about relativity, which by the way, he didn't really write it. The girl that he was with at the time wrote it, but he was the mastermind behind all the ideas there, because he wasn't, apparently, you know, according, I don't know, like that's what people say, that he wasn't that good at that cohesive writing. So she actually did it, which makes sense because you know, like I can kind of relate to that. So, but then how long did it take? I think it took like maybe 30 years after that paper is published before it became a consensus. It was a fringe science at that time, but then it became consensus. And I think it took 30 years of him going and talking with all the scientists and presenting it, and vouching for that theory, and as well doing the what do you call them, empirical tests to see if that's the case, and coming up with all sorts of ways to test it. And so we have relativity, theory of relativity, accepted. The same thing here, you know. So don't push too much. This is what I'm just saying. Get excited just enough, but don't push too much. Understand that every time you take a psychedelic, you sort of cross a certain type of boundary that technically you're not supposed to, and you're gonna have to pay for it. So, I mean, you can pay for it on the spot, and that is when you take a psychedelic, you don't go into the mind, you go through the heart. You go through the calibration, and you focus on the darkest energies that are there, and psychedelics will bring that up. And if you alchemize those energies and then pop into the mind, then you paid your dues, okay, and you don't have that type of backlash anymore. But if you don't pay your dues and you don't go through the heart into the mind, then there could be big problems. This is one of the things that, for example, prevented me from going into psychedelic world that much. I visited, but the amount of pain that I was encountering, and the amount of work that would have to do to break through, in my case, was so much that I I barely got to the nicely moving colors. It was all about alchemy for me, right? And that's what essentially what prevented me. But I know that they did not cut any corners, and for some reason, in my case, I wasn't sort of like even maybe my energy wasn't flowing in there. Like I could have ignored that, right? So people say like, well, bad trip, right? They say bad trip. Well, to me, it was just the only way I can have a good trip is if I first go through the bad one, quote unquote, alchemize those energies, then I have a good trip. Every trip is like this for me. Um, and sometimes like, oh, you gotta go through a lot of stuff. And but not for everybody. Other people can take it and it's just like, oh, it's going to. And once in a while they encounter like the bad trip. Not for me, because I know the price that I have to pay for to see those little nice little kaleidoscopic colors, you know, and all of these different fractals of reality and how it's structured. That kind of keeps me in check because I am almost not allowed to go there without paying the toll first. And I know other people too like that. And I know people who sort of are allowed, but then they pay a big price. And then I know the people who are allowed and they seemingly all right. You know, they seemingly all right for now. Maybe they will always be all right, hopefully. And so maybe there are certain types of souls out there that are sort of protected in this way, and somebody else is doing this for them, and that's why they're capable of doing this. But like I said, don't try this at home. If somebody can take DMT 200 times and be sort of totally fine for now, hopefully keep being fine, and it may be that like at this particular time is okay because the coherence of the planetary coherence is high enough for to sustain that, because people already dug through like the really rough patches, and so perhaps that is why. And if you've taken that in the past when the planetary coherence was lower, that would not be so fine. Perhaps that's how it works. But I do know that there is this planetary coherence that does determine the quality of the experience. So, going back to the archetypes. So all of these different states of consciousness, when they are approached from the source, are super interesting. You can go to this one and another, and that's what the DMT reality really is like. That's how people report it. But in my case, I don't have to smoke DMT, and in my case, I'm feeling it, right? This is exactly the feeling that you would have when you move from one archetype or state of consciousness to another, because I can refer to what it's like in a DMT experience. I can see that it's the exact same on quality of experience, but you see, but I'm not visually that type of immersed in it, but I'm practicing to connect more visuals to those feelings. But without the visuals, I already understand that I don't have to leave my body or whatever to already traverse these types of energies. That is a causal reality. This is what people usually refer to when they talk about like DMT realm or DMT space. It's a causal reality. It is not DMT. It is consciousness space. DMT just tends to take you there. So, okay, but you don't have to use DMT to get there. and you don't even need to leave your body. You can experience this quality of energies while you are just doing your normal things, and especially if you need to do something, right, like some sort of skill, some sort of performance or whatever, you can get in that archetypal state, and then that energy is moving through you, giving you new ideas, and using your machinery to accomplish a task. And that's how you move from the soul. Okay, and then this level, this theurgy level and soul level, now memory is more important, because if the first level is just like a point in a circle and that's all you need, really, the point in the circle, and in between the point and the circle, all sorts of states, right? It's right. It's actually, it's a sphere, and the nucleus. That's all it's required of you. It's a sphere and a nucleus, and you are moving between the aperture and the focal point to find that equilibrium. And as soon as you find it, you sort of almost do it intuitively, and the energy becomes sort of stabilized into that mystery energy. And take that mystery energy, and then you can turn it into ether, technically, which is now a vibration of energies, which is, like I said, a feeling that contains ideas, contains images, contains sensations, contains everything, right, already there. And I'm trying to, because, for example, listening to Krishnamurti, he was about nothing to do with memory, nothing to do with time. It is done instantaneously through your own and consciousness calibration, essentially. As he was talking, like choiceless awareness, he was talking with the aperture, right, the space, and attention. And that's what it is. It's between the attention and choiceless awareness, that, you see. And I found that there are these, it asks a little bit more air, it asks a little bit more fire, it asks a little bit more earth, concentration, and it's all in between, and you can find it. And that's it. That's just the game. It's a quite simple game. But you do this all the time as you move through life, ideally speaking. And so you're always about like this, no memory, no memory, no memory, no memory, about this development. And so understand that, yes, at this level, yes, technically there's no memory, except, the most basic one, the eternality, which is that awareness, in infinity, which is that attention. It's ever being, ever present, always will be, always has been. And that's why I call it quanta and not data, because it is not changeable. So that allows you to get that quality of spirit or mystery, bliss, slap label, whatever you want. But then the memory is important. I realize, and this is what he always said, look at it for yourself, don't believe me. And this is how I can see, of course, what he said is true, and his words were a type of guidance, but he also said, like, hey, you're gonna come across the things that I'm not telling you right now on purpose, and you're gonna have to see for yourself. And that's when I realize, on this other side, memory comes back into picture again, because you do need a memory to tap into one archetype or the other, right? One energy or the other. You do need a memory. Now, the expression of that may be different at that particular time, because the mystery energy may be different. Like if you recall that state now, as opposed to 2 months ago, it will the quality, it will be sort of the same, the theme will be the same, but it will be playing a little bit differently. And that you have to allow that quanta with the data, which is memory. And so that's why the soul expression is a type of merge between the information, which is the memory, right? Like when you look at the cymatics, you can see like there's clearly like a structure there, but then the vibrations is just like moving spontaneously and chaotically, but there's that structure there, and that structure is that memory part, and that vibration, that flow, that flux is that quanta part. The data part and the quanta part, they work together. And so you have to bring that quanta, but you also have to call upon data. You got to recall the state. You understand? Because what he was saying is that, like, when you experience something and it was amazing, then you create a picture of it, and then you want to experience again, and that becomes pleasure. And that is true only if you're not going back to the same way. Because you can recall that state. It's going to be different. You recall the thematics of it, but you let the quanta be different the way it wants to be now to maintain the quality of that joy, of that, you see, right, that passion. You cannot ask of it to be exactly the same as it was, because you're in a different time space right now. And that is going to be old news. It's not going to feel good anymore. But it has to be refreshed. But something that you may prefer, like, humor. Like, you can get in that humorous type of state, right? If you're interacting with somebody and it's like, what you gonna do? What's the purpose of interaction? Well, let's just have fun. Let's just be stupid. Let's just get in that state of humor and just enjoy, have fun, talk about something and laugh, whatever, right? You get in that state, and then sure enough, you banter and you have fun. You remember that state as a humor, as a state of banter, but you're giving it that spontaneous quality to it. So you recall, but you stream what's happening right now. You don't completely impose the same thing from the past, because then it's just too much mind entering this world, and it has to be like that, right? And if you've taken DMT, you probably have seen all these kaleidoscopic energies sort of like moving, and often it's a depiction of that primordial feeling state, And if it's not allowed to go through the quanta, then it is a type of rigid, soulless, ego-like expression, robotic, meaningless. You may see things outside. The person may be doing something, but there's just no soul, no vibration there coming, because they go directly from the memory. And that's why things get stale after a while. If there's nobody with a soul to refresh them, things get stale. And this is why, for example, there are these people who are idea thieves, and they take some sort of like an idea, right, which is stolen, and they do it, and the quality and awesomeness is not there anymore. It's because it's just stolen valor. You see, you cannot steal this thing. This is why it's such a valuable thing. There's one of the things that why I keep on doing things, because there's so many copycats out there. There's so many people who are just functioning just on the mind level and just, okay, you see like these types of, but there are people who are originators. They hold that energy, they hold that quality of consciousness. um you see, and so originators should be respected as originator, and copycats should be looked at as just distributors of that information. You see, I think everything's supposed to be fair. And one of the things that must be fair in society is the respect to that soul, to that human soul, and the capacity for somebody who is capable of living soul and not selling their soul and keep creating the art and whatnot. It has been neglected in a past iteration of the Hollywood, and and because everything, by the way, is a Hollywood, even show business, UFC is Hollywood. You see, like music industry is Hollywood. You know what I mean by Hollywood. And because the artists are who are in charge, right? The creators are who are meant to be in charge. Distributors and producers are tools. But then that was flipped up and said, oh no, producer is the boss, or the no, they're just distribution tools. And they need to be treated as such, not as I'm a higher position. No, I want to see that creators are the ones that are bosses, and producers are the ones that are just providing a service to them. And that's just where it's moving. And I see a lot of people are making movies that just post on their own website, like Bus Boys or that S4 Bob Lazar, documentary. And I love that. And they say, hey, watch it for $5, buy it for $20. You can say, well, everything can be pirated and whatever. Doesn't matter. People were still going to be paying, because like, hey, this is the money goes purely to the creator, to the person who created this. And the people will be gladly paying that $5 because it's not going through some corporate fucking schmuck who's a predator and a piece of shit and a stain on the society. So I'll gladly pay that $5 to watch a movie like that directly on their website. Why the fuck do I need Amazon? Why the fuck do I need Netflix? You see, I already have search engine. I can find whatever movie I need to watch. Yes, it would be nice if like eventually we have some sort of like non-corporate Netflix, or like community-driven Netflix, like Web 3.0 Netflix. It would be nice, where it's just like a cataloging. It's essentially just a catalog of all the movies with the suggestion algorithms, and that's it, right? No ads, nothing, right? I would love to see that. But this needs to happen. This needs to change. The pay must also reflect the director of the movie, the writer of the movie is supposed to be the boss, and they supposed to reap most of it. And the producers and they're supposed to reap their cut, but because of course there's work there, but they're not supposed to be these egotistical maniacs who dictate and say like, well, if you're not going to do this exactly the way I said, like, well, this is an artistic expression, you can put on this thing, you have to be flexible. And in the 80s and early 90s, and maybe a little bit like there's still, of course it wasn't just like it was one cutoff, but up to the early 2000s there were movies who were capable of sustaining this thing and making the producers happy, or these producers were more flexible and gave more trust to the artists. And then we had these really beautiful gems that we see like, wow, like really uplifting movies. And so everybody was happy, and they made money, and producers made money, you see. Because during the creation of a movie, there were so many spontaneous things and so many better ideas that you cannot do it through plan. And so there's a lot of spontaneity that had to be, and that's why these movies are the best movies, and they're still the best movies. So that needs to change. Hopefully, gradually, it has to flip. And I do envision a new type of Hollywood, Web 3.0 Hollywood, if you like, where where that is the case. You don't take the jobs from the producers, but you take their authority. You definitely take their authority over commanding over the creative process and whatnot. They do have jurisdiction, and they have to be stay in their lane as a service to the creators. And the creators choose, I want to work with this producer is better, this producer is not. You see what I'm trying to say? Like, that's what I would like to see. Because I see how consciousness is structured. That's how it's supposed to be structured in society as well. It's one of the things that, like, I'm discovering and exploring my consciousness, mostly without psychedelics. But I don't take anything away from people who do use psychedelics to explore consciousness. With, like I already explained, the cautionary tail side of it. But it has to mean something, right? That's why I'm writing a book, and later I'll spend the next 30 years, or talking about it or whatever, and trying little by little to change the consensus of the society for that progression to take place. Because the template of how society needs to be structured is already within our consciousness. And as soon as the people come to this type of coherence, that structure is already agreeable. They see this within themselves as like, oh yeah, of course that's how it's supposed to be. Fuck, we did it backwards. We freaking put the cart in front of the horse. Like, whoa, duh, no wonder shit all broke down. So let's just put it the right way. All right, look at that. It works now. you know? So there's that thing. And I call it consciousness calibration, then consciousness harmonization, then imagination, and then finally action. And so anyway, I just want to leave it at this archetypical level today, and maybe I'll make another video, because I had some insights on how motivation works on this side, because it does not work like it used to work. You almost like have to use will like magic, it okay, I guess we're already almost 1 hour, so why not? I'll talk about this too as a bonus. You deserved it. I mean, if you stayed 57 minutes already, you deserve the bonus. So all of this different archetypical energy gives you fuel, because it's like that type of energy, and then you can use that energy both ways. There's a physical, right? And then there's astral. There's certain things that you need to put some of that energy into astral and imagine like a big frame of things, right? But then you also have to take right action to meet that. If you don't take right action to meet that, nothing's going to happen. You see what I'm trying to say? So you have to work both. But that red shift and the blue shift are both type of like a magical environments, and they're supposed to be treated as such. What do I mean by that? In imagination, for example, things that you cannot foresee, and say, well, I don't know how to get there, right? That's when you use your imagination. And how do you do that? Create this archetypical state, that feeling, and match it with the vision that is the most pleasant for you, right? You can scan basically your consciousness, like, how does this feel? Oh, this feels so fucking good. And so then you just pour that energy on it, and it's this type of like ecstatic explosion, if you will. Sometimes it happens for me as an explosion. Sometimes it's just like a rush of that energy with that image, and that now you imprinted that astral layer of the reality. Okay, so now it's coming, but it's gonna come only as an opportunity. You see? And then this is what I've realized, man. Like, then for you to completely extract, the juices of the fruit that is coming for you, you still have to use this redshift magic. And how does this work? It works like it's a different quality of energy. It's more like ecstatic energy, because I can see the difference when the energy is flowing in my body or it's flowing in my mind. It's a different quality. It has this primordial quality of that joyful and really enjoyable experience, but it's a different. I do feel this energy. Okay, this is like redshift energy, right? And that's like orange, yellow, and red, and in I can feel the difference between those. And then of course these other quality, these other types of energies that are in the mind. I hope I'm making sense, right? Because it's just basically you push one type of ecstatic energy to the mind and another one in the body, but you got to do it both. And the body is still a magical world. It has restrictions, but it's still magical, meaning that, like, if you want to do something, right, you don't force yourself to do it. You come up with that image of that scene, and so we find the best and enjoyable factor about this, and you run that energy through it. Now you have that picture in your mind of, let's say, you going to the gym and exercising, and you flooded that little picture with all of those ecstatic feelings. Now, once you do that, guess what? Where your body is going to be leaning more towards going to the gym and enjoying the gym session, because you have already imbued that quality of joy with that image of you exercising. Does that make sense? It is not how it was before. Life is not like it was before on this holistic side. I tried to do this the old way, it's just not working. But if I look at this way, it's like, okay, if there's the block or this or that, then okay, this I have to transmute it and alchemize it and have that quality of energy, and then use that energy with the image that I want. And I have not seen this pointed out, but I've noticed it, and I am pointing out that the physical world, that energy of vitality, as people call it, right, is to do things, also runs on the same laws as the astral world. You will get whatever you imbue with that high quality of energy. And in the body, I call it vital energy, which is this. I also use the word ecstatic. And in the mind, I have not come up with a better word than an awe, but there's this type of another blue shift quality of bliss. You see, so there's this, there are four, and you see like this primordial mystery, bliss, spirit, and in the soul, ether, enjoyment, then in the mind, clarity, awe. I don't have yet like good words because there's so many of them that you can use, but I know these are four quality of energies, and they're all used in their appropriate places. Okay, and if something comes up in the physical reality, which is you say like, hey, I'm gonna go do this now, and you do this in your imagination, but this is not astral imagination. This is another layer. Sometimes people call it etheric, but I think it's wrong. It's not etheric. Etheric is something very, very deeply in your soul. This is in a body level. It's just like a body astral. I don't even know how to, it's actually just physical, but we don't tend to use this, because we tend to move automatically where, not like, we tend to move in a path of like avoiding pain and fear and stuff like that, right? And so it's like very programmable. But now you can just directly program it in something. For example, if think of something, and if I have like a very low energy and I'm thinking of that, I'm imbuing this low energy with that thing, and then I don't want to do that thing. So the right thing to do is to imbue that energy. It's going to imbue that image, but it's still an image. And I would like to separate those two: imagination and visualization. They are different. There's something about like that type of, you know, let's say you're in an astral world, and when you move there, when you move, you have intention to move from one place to another, which means you already have an image and you use the energy to move there. Now that type of energy is, you can call it vital, even though you're still out of the body, but because you are pretending the laws of physics exist, you're still doing the exact same thing. You understand? And that's the locomotion part of it. It's a vital use of energy, or vitality energy. It is this redshift energy that you use to move through the astral, even though you don't have to. Because you could also use imagination and you just completely break the laws of physics and reimagine something else. That's what imagination is for. So visualization and imagination, they're one is this more like a play mode where you just move through the environment, but in order to move through the environment you still have to have that visualization. It's like, okay, what's your intent right now? I visualize myself buying bananas. Okay, walking, listening to some music, buying bananas in the store. Okay, that sounds like fun. I just visualize that. Right now that's already imprinted, and now I'm going to be gravitating towards that naturally, because I already created that picture of me doing that, right? So as soon as I started living life like that, I know this is very different, and I still, now as I'm talking, that there's so much to, I don't know, guys, sometimes when I talk with you, I feel that resistant energy that I have to alchemize. But I still like talking about this. Because it is the way it is. I know that the changes has to be made slowly. I don't want to get caught in any kind of bullshit. I'm watching exactly how consciousness works, creating my little dashboard and creating my little use. I'm learning from scratch of how to live life. No one taught this. No one taught this. No one taught me this. And it's not forced. I don't have to force my body. Like, honestly, like my body, that my avatar, basically eventually, sorry, there we go, said basically, nah, bruh, I ain't doing that shit no more. Not like that. You can't keep on freaking, forcing me like that. And I had the time where I just basically, until I figured out of how to make my body do anything, I would not do anything. And I think that after living this life in a backwards ass way, we do have, we do earn like some time to retire and not have any kind of concerns and worries for a couple of years. I really think so. Um, as much as possible, because And of course, it's not like you're not doing anything, right? It's just that you're not forcing your body to do things. Now your energy is more about alchemizing the energies. And like I said, I'm learning, and I'm learning from my perspective. It's kind of a slow rate, but really from like a big perspective, it's quite fast. It's the last 5 years of what I learned and how I'm actually applying things differently. It's different. I don't live the same way anymore, right? Like when I go to the gym, the way I move there, it's not the same anymore. My focus is not the same anymore. Um, my focus is just enjoyment and focus on the contraction of the muscle and the motion of the energy, and it's just that. And if there's just goes a little bit past that, I ease in. I don't subscribe to this. That edge is great because you got to find that, because when you're exercising, you go into the pain, right? But you got to go into the pain to the extent that you're still enjoying, and you got to know. You see what I'm trying to say? So I'm just giving an example of how differently I work out of how I used to. And the same thing, I'm learning to imbue that approach everywhere in my life. You see? And it is the opposite of how most people live. And this is why that it takes a lot of that alchemy energy until people will catch up and start calibrating their consciousness themselves, and and becomes easier and easier then because people are picking up their own slack. That's why I want to do, through selfish reasons, because it makes my job a little easier if I have people around me who are calibrating their own energy. And I have friends who are also experimenting, experimenting with this and living through this direction, and rather than trying to improve themselves, they discover the genius within themselves through this way, not this abominable way of like listening or taking some fucking course of some douchebag who's just like with that fucking mic on a stage, pontificating there, who just read information but never slayed a single demon. Fuck those guys. And nothing they say will work, because you don't get to have that this way. You will mess your life up. Everybody who follow them in this way and not going through the outer needle first, gonna mess their life up. Hopefully people will help them up, but this is just not the way. It's a Luciferian type of way, right? Backwards ass way. It's all these people who are still have like all this fragmentation within their heart and trying to be superhuman. Shut the fuck up, okay? Calm down with superhuman. You still haven't got normal human relationship. Like, do you have one normal human relationship with another human being that you could say that is functional and beautiful and respectful? If you don't have that, shut the fuck up with the superhuman shit. Again, putting the cart in front of the horse. So you can tell that I'm a little bit passionate about this. But anyway, my mate. I'm gonna keep on talking. I don't have like a lot of subscribers, but yes, I know I should expand a little more, and I should put it on other platforms and things like that, and do my little work on that side. But I want to be cautious with that. I do not want this to become a vanity. I do not want to speak about the things that I have not, experienced myself and really thoroughly found out that to be right and correct. And I'm not just misguiding people, because then I would be misguiding myself. And so I'm very cautious with that, and I don't jump in, because I know some people just discover this like, oh, and then they just like jump in, and then they find themselves just instead of doing the work, babbling all the time, right? And I don't want to, I think I'm babble too much. I'm doing at least 1 hour of these videos a day. That's all. That might be already too much, you know what I'm saying? But that's the method that I use right now to really keep on calibrating, applying in my life, talking about it, applying in my life. I'm walking the walk, I'm not just reading in the book and saying these things to you for some vanity points. So I'll let it happen as it happens. I'll take my time, and I know that I don't want to get derailed and get too excited about, these things, and just, I don't want to follow in the footsteps of many of these people who just go this way. There's few people that I respect who actually maintain their integrity and, continue on this. One thing I really don't like when people like with a very high degree of integrity are going out on these ridiculous podcasts. Again, I understand perhaps like now it's like that they've done all the serious ones. Why not just go and do whatever? But I think you still have to be careful, and you still have to select to see that the you see like there's, you see what I'm trying to say, not to go too much. Like, yes, you can interact with all sorts of people, of course, but there's certain type of fringe group of people that are just way too clowny, and they don't really care about what you say. And I think you shouldn't be hanging out with these people, right? And so I see that there's people that go a little bit too clowny and becoming too much of an algorithm whore, and I'm like, okay, I think I've had enough with that type of approach. But if you are still, decent, like listen to Rupert Sheldrake talks and whatnot, and how he makes these little videos, is nice. But he doesn't make his face on his thumbnail like that, like, or whatever. He doesn't create these flashy red and yellow colors, which signifies the ripe fruit, and try to trigger and manipulate the people to be clicking. So why? What kind of audience are you gonna get? You're gonna get the audience like that, the same way that you are in the picture. So no. Why the fuck do we even do this thing, So that's what the algorithm works, right? Okay, so then again, and you talk about consciousness, and at the same time you're selling your soul, and and no. Big fucking no. Make a nice thumbnail, nice intro to the video, tasteful, whatever you like, what kind of music you like, whatever resonates with you, not the ones that like a pastel color sounds that just like to soothe and hypnotize your audience, which people do recognize this already, the intent of manipulating, and so fuck you with all of your thumbnails, with all of your tricky headlines of these marketers that created this. So see, you almost know that like the quality of the content is going to be crap based on how they are taking your attention, and it's almost like this more genuine, nice headlines without any intent of manipulate. It has this other type of feeling, and people tend to gravitate. So you have to be careful. There's too many, there's too much clownmanship going on, but then there's a real people there too, and I think that the real people need to be careful not to go onto these platforms that are selling them. That they don't really care. They just want their vanity points and their sales and whatever, and they use you as a commodity. This is what the Hollywood did this to these creative people. Don't do this, man. Have less views, but speak with the people that really care about what you do, right? And they could have like a nice production value and clean production value and no bullshit, right? And rely on their reputation as you know, people who produce podcasts and whatnot, and not on their capacity to manipulate. Because what are we doing? We're talking about consciousness, but at the same time we are treating each other as a bunch of animals. Nah, no. I don't care if you have 100,000 views. If you're a clown, you're a clown. You definitely get no respect from me. I don't give a shit if you have 100,000 views. And so anyway, so that's just my take how to move into this Web 3.0 type of approach between the creator and the producer. Producer is supposed to be a tool. That includes YouTube, supposed to be service, right? Like Odyssey supposed to be servicing the people. Now, what we do need right now, we do have the infrastructure, we just don't have consensus yet. The government's supposed to be involved and provide people with this, just like email is not owned by the corporation, right? So it's supposed to be like something like Netflix not owned by the corporation, something like YouTube not owned by the corporation. It's just like a digital human right that is servicing people. That's supposed to be part of the society. And these tools already exist, but we just didn't connect the dots together yet. These types of attention grabbing thumbnails and content supposed to be punished by the algorithm and put in the back as a low quality content, because why do you need to manipulate people? Why don't you rely on the quality of the content rather than attention grabbing? Attention grabbing is supposed to be respectful and stuff like that. And algorithm, yeah. And if you create a type of algorithm that does that, then you have much cleaner content, how originally YouTube was, and so on. But these things supposed to be worked on, and they don't just happen by themselves. And when they're not worked on, you need to have your own boundaries, right? In the sphere of YouTube, you got to select, like, okay, this is too much of a clown. Okay, this is a nice quality content. Okay, I see these are two human beings interacting and they're being real and genuine. Great, that's my thing. Subscribe, like, great. And the other one's fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. So even within this tool, you have to have your own boundaries. Not an excuse to just go with the flow of the algorithm, because you lose your soul, you lose joy, you lose enjoyment. It matters, because then you go into the pleasure, right? This is all about pleasure. They grab your attention, and then the thing is about babbling something that doesn't really apply to your life at all. It's just like hypnotizing you. But you just can't help but keep on watching. It's like, what? Am I learning something? No, nothing. But look, why can't I stop watching it? Oh my fucking God, it's just like a drug. And then you realize, no, this is a toxic ass shit, and and nope. I'd rather keep my soul. So don't drain your soul with giving your attention to these types of things. Be selective. I made that video, Equal Exchange of Value, that includes your attention as well. Anyway. Just to finish this video, I think Mate kicked in, so I started babbling a little more. Okay, so this is how you access this archetypical things. It is a multiple personality order. Because anything that you do in life, you do need to shift your state in order to excel at that thing, whatever you do. Okay? People may not even understand how the fuck do you learn things so fast, and how do you get that, you see what I'm trying to say? But That's because you use your consciousness correctly and appropriately, and that's why. And I can feel it. I just coming to this point where my consciousness is just about to function appropriately. You understand? Like, I think I'm about to become sane. That's another way of saying it. There is this point where things are working as supposed to. Not that there's no work anymore. It's continuous and learning. But at least you get up to speed of how to. Like no one told me this, for example, that I discovering by myself is like, wait a second, this physical reality is it's still like astral. It's still magical. It has its own laws and restrictions, but it runs on the same laws. I have to visualize myself doing something and have that feeling of whatever that feeling is going to be, and then I'll do it, and that's magically enough I'll be doing it and enjoying it, right? I'm almost like pointing and clicking to my body of where to go. I'm not forcing it. I'm not saying like now you go this and then there's this resistance in the body and then let's use the willpower and force this. It's wastage of energy. It's inappropriate use of your consciousness, and that's insane. That's maniac. Okay, and it's that's why like it pains me to see these people who go this way, these maniac people, and it also I don't like when people are sort of celebrating these things like, oh, look at this person. Yeah, but look at this. There's no soul in this person left. It's a complete psychopath maniac. And they talk weird, and it's like, no, please, let's not celebrate it. This motherfucker went backwards, okay? And accomplishment is great, fantastic. They're supposed to be rewarded, but it is not through beating yourself up and calling yourself a bitch and stuff like that, or beating your inner bitch. No, this is how to destroy your soul and destroy your life. No. There is an appropriate use of willpower on the things that are appropriate and meaningful, and in sports and everything, and understanding of how to use that willpower to the point where you're not breaking things, but you're not too weak, and you just find that sweet spot. Like, you can do this right. See what I'm trying to say? And this is why sometimes you see the people who are just like in the gym, like enjoying and it's just like having fun, and people who just like, oh, here's another set, It's like, oh my God, Jesus fucking Christ, why are you killing yourself like that? You know, they're not even competing. Even if you do compete, like that type of pushing yourself to the limit is still supposed to be enjoyable. You're supposed to be like, oh fuck, like nice type of feeling. But as soon as the joy is gone, this is it. This is stop whatever you're doing, because so what that you're gonna win the trophy even? It's gonna be meaningless. Anyway, hopefully it lands. Hopefully it makes sense. And even when I'm discovering these things, I still, just because I discover it doesn't mean that I'm regularly applying. And so I have to keep on like creating new habits, new pathways within my consciousness to function this way. And it's not easy. Sometimes it's just like, it takes a toll, and it's like, oh, fuck, like I need to lay down, And then again, when I start, okay, making sure that I'm using it. And sometimes I forget, and I go on this and then realize like, oh, wait a second, I'm forcing myself again. You see, so there's a learning curve that's going on, but definitely I'm learning this, how to use your consciousness, and I really want to settle into this in the right way, and only then scale. And that's why sometimes like people may say like, why aren't you scaling? Why aren't you doing this? It's like, nah, bro. Like I already witnessed what happens when you scale things without the foundation set right. I still have a lot of time. I'd rather set the foundation right and then just like that bamboo, set the root canals and then grow 1 foot a day. I'm just setting my roots. And I know because I can see what's happening within me. It's like if I'm ready to scale or not. And if I'm not ready to scale, then I gotta do my work where that pathway is, you know, my brain is being rewired. You understand? The pathways of my neurons are being reconnected. So because I am one of those people who lived life backwardly and now have to live life forwardly, or correctly. So that's why that rewiring of the brain takes time and anyway. Because when you are flying at high speeds, you better be in control. That's another thing I have to say. I talk about these archetypical energies and everything, and some of them are so intense. So, because if you don't got the handle on them, if you do have to get handle on them, then it could be something very incredibly thrilling and passionate to experience. But you don't. If you don't got the handle on them, um, when that motherfucker crashes, flying at high speed, there's pain. You understand? Like the machine must be so fluent and so well oiled that these high speeds there is no friction. Because if there is friction at these high speeds, there's this and there's pain, basically the feedback. So you cannot run all of that energy, high degree of energy, when there's no pathways. You gotta learn, and this is includes like how you deal with other people, and you can come up with all this like very intense energy, but you gotta be sort of almost like a reservoir of that energy, and not jolt people with that energy. You understand? Because if you jolt somebody who doesn't even have the pathways laid out for that, you fry the circuits, and the result is not enjoyment but fear, because they can't handle that much. You understand? But of course, there's some part on them of learning to recognize high quality of energy and open up, open up to that. Um, because there is that light that is worth opening up to, and there is that light that is not worth opening up to because it's a false light. And so if somebody, especially women, if they went with this false light because there's a man learn of how to manipulate and falsify the signs and symptoms and status of that quality that he meant to have, and then woman realize, oh my god, like I've been sold a melon, I fell for this shit. And then might be conclusion that like, hey, all men are like that, and that's not a good conclusion, because all men are not like that, just like all women are not like that. Some women can sell you um, um, you know some women can sell you a lemon and you thought that you're getting love, and some men can sell you a lemon and you thought that you're getting light. See what I'm trying to say? So it's just okay. I think we all fall for it at least once, but then that allows us to recognize what's the quality, what's not, the difference between those energies, and so on, so on. And so then, little by little, we can regain trust, and that's how I also, like I can see some women, they sort of out of habits because they learned how to manipulate men, and they do all these things, but it's so freaking obvious, it's embarrassing to me. It's like, I know what you're doing here. Now, something I don't say that, but I definitely don't fall for this. I can see that, like, I can see what kind of game she's playing, and I may excuse myself and say, like, you know, gotta go, because that's not what I really want. But there's some that are for real, for legit, and of course we all got hurt at some point in the past. But there's this legitimate openness, and it's like, hey, I feel like this is safe to play. It doesn't end up in a disaster. You see what I'm trying to say? Because it's legit. Anyway, that's enough of the babble for today. Thanks for watching. Book one session if you haven't already. Peace, and I'll see you in the next one.